It's just a matter of time.
Phone service, and I was talking to Shooter saying, I don't think I'm coming out there to make this record. I just don't think I can do it.
These days.
She's doing really good. She calls me and we talk all the time. She's beautiful. I was very young, knew how to push the buttons. I thought there was more fish in the sea.
She was not even old enough to drive a car, but Tanya Tucker was already driving the entire country music industry into a frenzy. At just 13 years old, she stepped onto the stage with a voice that did not sound like a little girl's voice. It sounded like it had lived through decades of heartbreak, grit, and survival. The song was Delta Dawn, and the moment it hit the airwaves in 1972, America knew something unusual had just happened. Here was a child delivering lyrics about a faded Southern belle and broken dreams, yet she sang with a conviction that made grown men and women believe every word. But what most fans did not realize was how risky this all was. Nashville executives did not know what to do with her. Some whispered that a teenager singing about lost love and desperation was inappropriate, maybe even dangerous. Yet others believed this was exactly what country music needed. A shock, a spark, a new face that was not polished into the usual mold. Tanya's family had always known she was different. She was born in Seminole, Texas in 1958. But her childhood was anything but stable. Her father moved the family around chasing work, from Texas to Arizona, Utah, and even Nevada. This meant Tanya grew up tough, used to change, and always with music playing in the background. By the time she was 9, she had told anyone who would listen that she would be a singer. She did not just want it, she expected it, and her parents backed her all the way. Her father, Bew, became her manager, her driving force, and her protector in an industry that did not forgive mistakes. Still, nobody could have predicted how quickly she would explode onto the scene. When Delta Dawn climbed the charts, people said Tanya was the next Loretta Lynn or Tammy Wynette, but in truth, she was something else entirely. She was not just performing songs, she was embodying them in a way that made listeners wonder if she had already lived through the pain she described. That rawness made her irresistible to the press and to fans, but it also meant she grew up in the public eye at a speed no child could handle. Almost overnight, she went from a small-town kid to touring alongside legends, earning money and attention most adults could only dream about. But with fame came pressure. Record labels wanted to package her as a novelty. Others wanted to mold her into a teenage pop star, and Tanya herself fought to be taken seriously. She did not want to be remembered as a kid who had one hit and faded away. She wanted to dominate, and for a while, she did. By the mid-70s, she was scoring hits like What's Your Mama's Name and Blood Red and Goin' Down, songs that dug even deeper into dark adult themes. Tanya was not just holding her own, she was becoming the voice of her generation, someone who could take taboo subjects and sing them with a fearless edge. The industry had never seen anything quite like her. But what nobody wanted to admit was that giving a teenager that much power, attention, and money was dangerous. Behind the bright lights, Tanya was already learning lessons that would haunt her for decades. She had the fame, the voice, and the spotlight. But she was about to discover that being a star so young meant paying a price most people would not survive. As Tanya Tucker's career rocketed into the mid-1970s, the little girl who stunned audiences with Delta Dawn was no longer just a novelty act. She was a force, but fame at that level, especially for someone barely out of childhood, was not just overwhelming, it was combustible. If you're enjoying this incredible story of one of country music's most fascinating rebels, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into music history. Tanya was suddenly living a lifestyle filled with tour buses, late nights, and constant media attention. She was not playing catch-up with the adults in the industry. She was running right alongside them, sometimes even outpacing them. And for a teenager still figuring out who she was, that speed came with dangerous curves. By the time she was 18, Tanya had already developed a reputation not just as a gifted singer, but as someone who did not follow the rules. She was bold, outspoken, and not afraid to experiment with her image. In 1978, she shocked Nashville by releasing TNT, a rock-leaning album where she posed in a leather jumpsuit on the cover, looking more like a rebel rocker than a country sweetheart. Fans did not know what to think. Was she abandoning her roots? Was she trying too hard to reinvent herself? For Tanya, the answer was simple. She did not want to be boxed in. She wanted to prove she could do anything, sing anything, and stand toe-to-toe with the men who dominated outlaw country. And in many ways, she did. She toured with icons, sang songs about betrayal, drinking, and heartbreak that sounded like they belonged to someone twice her age, and lived her life in the spotlight without apology. But being a part of the outlaw movement was not just about the music. It was about the lifestyle. Tanya became known for her fiery relationships, her wild streak, and the way she embraced controversy rather than hiding from it. Rumors swirled constantly about her romances, especially her high-profile relationship with Glenn Campbell. Their pairing was passionate, dramatic, and at times self-destructive, fueling tabloid headlines that seemed to overshadow her music. Some critics accused Tanya of losing her way, more interested in making noise off stage than making hits on it. Others admired her for daring to be different in a world that wanted female artists to play it safe. And Tanya herself? She did not care what people thought. She was determined to live life her way, even if it meant burning bridges in the process. Still, behind the defiance, there was an unspoken truth. She was struggling. The pressures of maintaining fame, the constant attention on her personal life, and the temptations of the outlaw lifestyle began to take their toll. Tanya was still young, but already she was slipping into habits and situations that would haunt her for years. Some nights were filled with applause and bright lights, but others ended in loneliness, with Tanya questioning whether she could keep it all together. For every hit single, there was a rumor, a fight, or a headline about her behavior. Nashville's golden child had become its wild card, and while fans loved her unpredictability, the industry was not so forgiving. By the early 80s, cracks were beginning to show in her once unstoppable rise. Radio stations that once championed her started pulling back, and whispers grew louder that Tanya Tucker might become just another cautionary tale. She had the fame, the money, and the notoriety. But the question was this: could she hold on to the respect? The next chapter of her story would prove just how fragile her empire had become. By the early 1980s, Tanya Tucker had already lived more lives than most artists twice her age. She had gone from prodigy to outlaw, from child star to tabloid sensation. But the glittering success that once seemed unstoppable was now slipping through her hands. Nashville is an industry that loves a comeback, but it also has a short memory, and Tanya was finding out how quickly doors can close. Radio play began to slow, critics questioned her choices, and the same boldness that once made her stand out was suddenly being painted as recklessness. Her relationship with Glenn Campbell had become a symbol of chaos rather than romance. Their arguments, breakups, and reconciliations became gossip fodder, overshadowing her music. For a young woman still trying to prove herself, it was exhausting. Behind the stage lights, Tanya was battling demons few outsiders ever saw. The temptations of the outlaw lifestyle caught up with her quickly. The late nights, the drinking, the chaos of being on the road. Rumors swirled about her habits, with some insiders saying she was spiraling out of control. Friends and colleagues worried she was losing focus, and even her fans could sense the strain. Tanya was no longer the unstoppable teenager with a voice beyond her years. She was a woman carrying the weight of fame, heartbreak, and bad choices on her shoulders. And Nashville is a place where second chances are rare, especially for women. Male artists could stumble and come back stronger. But for Tanya, every mistake was amplified, every headline another nail in her reputation. By the mid-80s, many wondered if her career had already peaked, if Tanya Tucker was destined to be remembered as a child prodigy who burned out before her time. But Tanya was not ready to give up. In fact, she was preparing for a fight. The comeback she staged in the late 1980s was not just about reclaiming her place in country music. It was about survival. Determined to prove she was not finished, she cleaned up her image, refocused on her music, and returned to the charts with hits like Love Me Like You Used To, Strong Enough to Bend, and Two Sparrows in a Hurricane. These songs were not just catchy. They told a story of resilience, heartbreak, and endurance. Themes Tanya knew intimately by then. Fans who had once doubted her suddenly saw a new side. A survivor who had lived through scandals, heartbreaks, and near collapse, yet came back stronger than ever. Still, as triumphant as her return was, Tanya understood something many did not. Every comeback in country music comes with a price, and the same industry that cheers you on can turn against you without warning. She was back in the spotlight, winning fans and rebuilding her reputation, but deep down she knew the fight was not over. The question was not whether Tanya Tucker could return, it was how long she could hold on. By the time the 2000s rolled around, Tanya Tucker's career seemed to be in a holding pattern. She was a respected name, a country icon, who had survived scandals, rivalries, and reinventions, but the hits were not flowing the way they once had. To many in Nashville, she was a living legend, but not a chart-topping force anymore. It would have been easy for her to rest on her past glory, perform the old songs, and fade comfortably into legacy status. But Tanya Tucker has never been comfortable with the easy road. In 2019, after years of silence in the studio, she made a move that stunned both fans and critics. She released a brand new album of original material, While I'm Livin'. This was not just another record, it was a declaration that Tanya still had something to say. And the gamble paid off bigger than anyone expected. The project was shepherded by two unlikely allies, Brandi Carlile, a rising Americana powerhouse, and Shooter Jennings, the son of outlaw legend Waylon Jennings. They did not just produce an album for Tanya, they helped her dig into her life story and put it into music. The songs on While I'm Livin' were not polished radio hits designed to chase trends. They were raw, intimate, and deeply personal. Tracks like Bring My Flowers Now felt like Tanya was laying her soul bare. Her voice, weathered but powerful, carried decades of pain, resilience, and grit. Listeners could hear the teenager who once stunned the world, but now with the weight of a lifetime behind every note. For fans who had followed her for decades, it was a revelation. For younger audiences, it was an introduction to an artist who had been shaping country music long before they were born. Then came the moment nobody predicted. At the 2020 Grammy Awards, Tanya Tucker won not one, but 2 Grammys, her first ever. After nearly 5 decades in the business, she was finally recognized by an industry that had often overlooked her. The wins were not just trophies, they were vindication. Tanya had fought through decades of ups and downs, scandals and personal struggles, only to return with a project that critics hailed as her best work yet. Suddenly, the narrative was not about Tanya's past controversies or missed chances. It was about her resilience, her ability to rise again when everyone thought she was done. For Tanya, the Grammys were more than a career highlight. They were proof that her voice still mattered. She was not just surviving in country music, she was shaping it once again, and the industry was forced to admit what fans had always known. Tanya Tucker was never a relic of the past. She was a survivor, a fighter, and an artist who refused to be silenced. But if While I'm Living shocked everyone by proving Tanya could rise again, the years that followed would show she was not finished rewriting her legacy. The next chapter would be even more unexpected. After the triumph of While I'm Livin', many assumed Tanya Tucker had given fans her final masterpiece, a late career jewel to close the book on one of country music's most unpredictable journeys. But Tanya had no intention of fading quietly. In 2022, she shocked audiences again with Sweet Western Sound, an album produced once more by Brandi Carlile and Shooter Jennings. It was not just a follow-up. It felt like the continuation of a story she had only just begun telling. The album leaned heavily into themes of reflection, legacy, and resilience. Songs like Ready as I'll Never Be carried the weight of someone who had lived through every twist and turn fame could throw at them. Critics praised it as proof that Tanya's voice, though weathered, was sharper, stronger, and more authentic than ever. At the same time, a new wave of attention surrounded Tanya with the release of the documentary The Return of Tanya Tucker, featuring Brandi Carlile. The film did not just celebrate her career, it stripped back the layers to reveal the woman behind the music. Viewers saw her vulnerability, her doubts, and her complicated relationship with an industry that often underestimated her. The documentary painted Tanya not as a perfect star, but as a fighter who had endured and adapted. For younger audiences who only knew her name in passing, it was an introduction to the battles she had fought and won to remain standing. For longtime fans, it was a reminder of why they had fallen in love with her story in the first place. And then came the crowning moment. In 2023, Tanya Tucker was officially inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. For decades, fans had argued she deserved the honor, and now the industry had finally caught up. Standing among legends, Tanya's induction was not just recognition of her hits, but of her entire journey. From the 13-year-old girl who stunned the world with Delta Dawn, to the rebel who defied Nashville's rules, to the survivor who reclaimed her voice when no one thought she could. It was a full-circle moment, the kind most artists dream of, but few actually live to see. But Tanya's story does not stop with awards and accolades. Even as she stood in the Hall of Fame, celebrated as one of the country's greats, there were still shadows from her past that followed her. The controversies, the personal battles, the choices that made her both admired and criticized, all of it still lingers when her name comes up. For Tanya Tucker, success has never erased the struggles. And that tension between the legend on stage and the woman behind the scenes is exactly what keeps her story so fascinating. Because no matter how high the honors, Tanya's legacy will always be about more than her music. It will be about her fight to exist on her own terms. For all the headlines about Tanya Tucker's music, relationships, and scandals, perhaps the most personal battles she ever faced came not under the spotlight, but in her private life as a mother. In 1989, when she became pregnant with her first child, Presley, it was not met with joy and congratulations from her record label. It was treated like a crisis. Tanya has recalled how executives and even her own father gathered for a tense meeting where the first words spoken were not about her health or happiness, but "who's the daddy?" In an era where female stars were expected to project a spotless image, Tanya's pregnancy was seen as a liability. Her career had already faced turbulence, and now the industry feared it would unravel completely. Instead of support, she was met with judgment, as if motherhood was incompatible with stardom. But Tanya refused to hide. She went through with her pregnancy, raised Presley proudly, and later welcomed 2 more children, Beau and Layla. Yet the scrutiny never stopped. Every choice she made as a single mother was dissected, every misstep magnified. Unlike her male counterparts, many of whom juggled children, scandal, and music careers without the same criticism, Tanya was forced to constantly defend herself. Whispers in Nashville circles suggested she was reckless, that she was putting her family above her career, as though the two could not coexist. And for Tanya, those whispers cut deep. She loved her children fiercely, but she also refused to let go of the stage that had defined her life. The balancing act was brutal, and at times it seemed the industry wanted her to choose between being a mother and being an artist. Still, Tanya turned that pressure into resilience. She raised her children largely out of the spotlight, giving them as normal a life as possible while continuing to tour and record. Her daughters, especially, have begun carving their own paths in music, a quiet nod to the legacy she created. But Tanya never forgot the sting of being judged for her choices. In interviews, she has admitted how difficult it was to be taken seriously as both a mother and a performer, how the industry tried to put her in a box that did not fit. The very traits that made her a rebel, her independence, her defiance, her refusal to play by Nashville's rules, also made her motherhood a lightning rod for criticism. And yet, when fans look back at Tanya's career, many see her greatest success not just in her songs, but in her survival. She did not cave under the weight of judgment. She raised her children, reclaimed her music, and outlasted an industry that often stacked the odds against her. Even today, those stories of confrontation, of label meetings, of public doubt, of whispered criticism add to the aura that Tanya Tucker never truly belonged to Nashville's rules. She belonged to herself. And it's that defiance, both as a star and as a mother, that turned her into not just a survivor, but a legend. No story of Tanya Tucker is complete without the storm of romances and scandals that followed her through the decades. From the very beginning, her personal life was inseparable from her career, and she seemed to attract as much attention for who she loved as for what she sang. The most infamous chapter, of course, was her turbulent relationship with Glen Campbell. When the two began dating in the early 80s, Glen was more than 20 years her senior, a country superstar in his own right, and their bond quickly became one of the most talked about stories in Nashville. Their connection was passionate, but it was also explosive, fueled by jealousy, addiction, and volatile arguments. The tabloids feasted on every detail, painting Tanya and Glenn as both lovers and combatants, a couple as famous for their fights as for their music. For Tanya, it was a relationship that both defined and nearly destroyed her. A constant reminder of how love in the spotlight can burn twice as bright and twice as fast. But Glenn was not the only man linked to Tanya. Through the years, she was rumored to have flings or romances with some of the biggest names in entertainment, from Merle Haggard to Andy Gibb. Each story added to her reputation as a wild child, someone who lived by her own rules even when it meant fueling controversy. Some saw her as reckless, others as daring, but Tanya never seemed interested in defending herself. She often shrugged off the gossip, insisting her private life was her own business, but she also knew that every rumor kept her name in the headlines. In a way, the controversies became part of her brand, the untamed woman of country music who refused to fit the mold of the sweet, quiet, traditional female star. Of course, the scandals were not always about romance. Tanya's partying lifestyle, her brushes with substance abuse, and her sometimes erratic behavior on and off stage gave critics plenty to talk about. She was labeled unpredictable, even self-destructive, and there were years when fans genuinely feared she might not make it through. But each time, Tanya clawed her way back. The same fire that fueled the scandals also fueled her comebacks. She did not just survive her controversies. She used them to carve out an identity that was raw, real, and impossible to ignore. In an industry that often demanded silence and submission from women, Tanya Tucker built her legacy by refusing to apologize. Her scandals may have kept her on the front pages, but they also cemented her image as one of country's true rebels. From the moment a 13-year-old girl belted out Delta Dawn, Tanya Tucker's life was destined to be anything but ordinary. She did not just step into country music, she kicked the door open, refusing to play by rules that were designed to limit her. Over the decades, she has been praised, criticized, celebrated, and condemned. She has known the heights of fame, the depths of scandal, and the slow burn of being underestimated. Yet through it all, Tanya Tucker has remained exactly what she always promised to be, unapologetically herself. Her journey is a story of contradictions. She was a child star who became an outlaw, a headline maker who fought to be respected as an artist, a mother judged for her choices, and a survivor who outlasted nearly every critic who doubted her. At times, it seemed the chaos of her personal life would bury her talent. But time after time, she clawed her way back, each comeback stronger than the last. The Grammys, the Hall of Fame induction, the documentaries, these were not just industry honors, they were vindication for a woman who had been told too many times that she was not enough, or that she had gone too far. And yet, Tanya's true legacy does not lie only in her awards or her hit songs. It lies in the way she made people feel. Fans saw in her a reflection of their own struggles, the heartbreak, the rebellion, the resilience. She was not the polished, untouchable star that Nashville often tried to create. She was real, flawed, messy, and brave. That's why people connected to her, and that's why her story still resonates decades after she first stormed the charts. Today, when Tanya Tucker steps onto a stage, she carries with her not just a catalog of songs, but a lifetime of survival. Every note tells a story of triumph over doubt, of fire that refused to go out, of a woman who lived her life her way. For anyone who has ever been told they cannot, Tanya's life is living proof that you can. She is more than a singer, more than a survivor. She is a legend forged in fire. And the truth is, Tanya Tucker's story is not over yet. Because if there is one thing her life has shown us, it is that just when you think she is finished, Tanya will always have one more surprise waiting.